The government of India does not like a large section of digital media, and that's become more obvious because of a new bill that the government is trying to push through called the Broadcasting Services Regulation Bill. Through this bill, the government wants to bring all content creators, not just news handles or news channels, but all content creators on the internet under one umbrella or a licensing authority. Is this bill democratic? Why has this bill been brought now? What is going to be the chilling effect? I've been in conversation with Nikhil Pahwa, the editor of Medianama, and journalist Akash Banerjee, better known as Deshbhakt. Last time when the government brought in the digital news media rules, we at the News Minute had strongly opposed it. I was one of those people who had gone to court against it. This time too, we will raise our voice against such draconian laws. But we can do this only because of the courage that you, our readers and viewers give us. Remember, we are an ad-free platform. We do not take government ads and therefore we are not scared of governments. Keep supporting our work, become a paid subscriber. The link is below. And now let's go to the conversation. I'll come to you first, Nikhil. Explain to us what is this Broadcasting Regulation Services Bill?
So Dhanya, so this what's happened is that the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting has just released a bill, uh, which if it's passed by Parliament will become law, uh, privately and secretly in draft format, which seeks to regulate all kinds of broadcasters, and by broadcasters they're referring to even those who share their content on social media, which means all of us, anyone who has a social media account, could come under the ambit of this bill. So basically, Twitter users, YouTubers, Facebook people are posting on Facebook, Instagrammers, uh, and because of global applicability, even people who use TikTok would come under the ambit of this bill. And then the difficult portion is that they will have regulatory overheads. They will have to comply with certain norms. In They'll have to set up some committees, join some organizations. There's going to be an increase in cost for them. Essentially, what the ministry is saying is that there is content being published on the internet, and we need to regulate that content by regulating those who are publishing that content. And they're keeping some thresholds for entertainment or non-news stuff, like like travel videos, etc. Um, and they're keeping a no threshold for news, as long as these things are a part of a systematic business activity. So why we have this bill now is because in 2021, if you remember, there was this entire fracas about Twitter and the IT rules, and the Delhi police landed up in Twitter's offices. Um, Alongside that regulation on Twitter and social media, there was an additional two sets of regulations that were rules that were passed under the IT rules 2021, which regulated online news and online streaming content. Those rules were challenged by news organizations, saying that these are illegal because there is no law backing them. And in order to justify that aspect, like this, those rules are legitimate, they are legal. Because there's a court case, the government is coming out with this broadcast bill. Except that, because there's a new bill, they're expanding the scope to include everyone under the sun.
So, Nikhil, just to simplify this for our viewers, we are seeing a new bill being introduced, which will actually bring all digital broadcasters, including Akash and anyone who is on YouTube, who's on Instagram, or any other platform who is into news. And I have one more doubt. The bill also uses the word textual program. So, even a tweet or a status that you
Yes.
can write regularly will come under the bill, right?
So
And you
there are some Twitter users that have recently reached 100 million followers, like our Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, because of and a lot that he tweets about is related to news, or it's an analysis or a justification. or it is even breaking news sometimes that comes from that account. And so therefore that account will come under this regulation, and our prime minister will have to register with the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. He will have to set up a uh, sign up with a industry self-regulatory organization like DigiPub maybe. So he'll come under the regulation for news. Anyone can. I can run a blog and run an ad on it, and if I write about news, I will come under that regulation. Or if I don't write under the news, I'll be regulated as OTT streaming or as well. So these are very broad regulations.
Nikhil is saying even the Prime Minister will have to maybe come under DigiPub, which you are a member of. How would it be, Akash, to actually share, to be part of a club where the Prime Minister is also there?
No, I wouldn't really like it. Not a very delightful thought. So Nikhil has, of course, given you the broad parameter of what this legislation is all about in the legalese and in the bill sense of it. Then, yeah, the reason why all of this is happening is, please understand, it's a backhand compliment as well. I say that the government has now taken cognizance finally that digital content creators have become so important that they are being equated to to OTT platforms and broadcast platforms. Remember, when you talk about an OTT platform, you're talking about hundreds of crores of rupees. You're talking about hundreds and thousands of at least hundreds of employees who are generating tons of content at a very professional level. Nowhere in the world would you have a government even dream of putting tweeters or YouTubers or Instagrammers on the same position as OTT platforms. What is the intent? And we can talk about the bill and what the government wants to do, and the government wants to keep law and order and a level playing field, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's the chilling effect. Please understand that when you bring in a legislation which says that even somebody on a tweet with no limits, so anybody who's opened a Twitter account with 5 followers also will have to adhere to a set of norms. This is basically going back to the days of license Raj. Now, since you can't theoretically license and have YouTube channels apply for a license like television and newsprint, you bring it as close to licensing as possible. This is basically burying digital content creators under paperwork. Let's not beat around the bush. This is what the government is giving back for 2024, and that is why we have the expansion of the scope. Remember, broadcast bill itself is not new. Remember, grievance redressal cell is already not new. Now, this added point of professional news creators. Why? We all know why. We all know who is going to be targeted with this. We all know who will be made to comply with this. We all know who will be made to join and be buried with mountains of paperwork in this. So make no mistake, this is in real time. We are seeing the death of independent digital media happening. The only reason I want to talk about is that tomorrow, when this actually happens, at least let this be on record that this played out in front of everyone. As it played out, we are telling you exactly how it's playing out, and let's see how it ends. And it's up to the opposition, I think, to prevent this from happening. Otherwise, it will happen.
Couple of things at Akash also. I want to divide this. One is, of course, what is the license Raj, which the government wants to bring in. Second is the chilling effect it has. And third, what are the emergency powers that the government is giving itself? Quickly about the license Raj, so that it's really broken down, Nikhil. One is if I am a Instagrammer or broadcaster or I have a YouTube channel, I have to now inform the government that I'm running this YouTube channel. I have to be part of a self-regulating authority. For example, somebody has to create the self regulating authority, which has to have a former judge, three or four people who are experts. And I also have to have my own grievance redressal officer, right, Nikhil?
Yes, you have to have your own. This is if you are doing news. And the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that this has jurisdiction outside of India. So one big shift from the previous version of the bill to current version was that there was a limiting clause saying this is applicable only to citizens of India. Now it is applicable to all individuals, which means that Donald J. Trump, who has around 87 million followers, will also be regulated by this bill, whether he'll sign up with digipub or not is beyond, we don't know yet. But the extraterritorial application of this bill means that everyone across the globe will be impacted, but obviously they won't sign up. So there's going to be arbitrariness in enforcement, and they might go after one or two or three different YouTubers or different channels when they want to, and not go after the rest of them. So this bill is arbitrary by design, and its scope is massive by design.
For
This is the
example, let's
problem that
take
we're
somebody
seeing.
like let's take somebody like Dhruv Rathi, for example, who
Oh,
does not
definitely covered on this bill.
who he does not
Dhruv
operate
Rathi
out of.
is going to be covered because he also has a substantial number of users, although there is no threshold for news. Uh, See, it's under systematic business activity. So even if let's say Donald Trump doesn't monetize his channel, as a politician, his business is basically, you could say the Twitter channel is marketing for his business, which is being a politician, right? And so, how do you define systematic business activity here? Is it only related to revenue, or is it could be marketing as well?
Mm.
That's the tricky part, right? So there's going to be, it's arbitrary by design, its scope is broad by design, so as to bring everyone into its net, and create this regulatory overhead, having to join different
Nikhil, um,
self-regulatory organizations. Yeah.
I don't know if you've studied this part, but because you've gone in depth into the bill, and just to get a sense to people who are viewing this, have you come across any other example of a democratic country where YouTubers, and this time now without limit who do news, have to be part of any regulatory authority, have to do paperwork?
Honestly, I'm not aware of how this is done in the rest of the world. I've only looked at this, and on principle, it seems wrong to me. There are, of course, heavily regulated societies where content is massively regulated, like in case of China, where the role of the CCP at the central level is actually to maintain peace and harmony and control. And so they do. There is censorship that happens across the board. I don't think we're there yet, but this is one step towards that path of exercising significant control. The other thing is that there are obviously anonymous channels which are be putting out information on the internet, right? So one other clause in this bill talks about regulating social media companies, and if they don't give information and all the information regarding certain users that the government might request, and there's no reason and no limitation specified for this, they will be criminally liable. So the rules, and there might be more rules regarding social media intermediaries which haven't yet been defined, but the bill says that they will be defined in the future. So this is the beginning. It might seem benign right now, but what kind of a regulatory control regime we see in the future, this bill will basically set the baseline for that. And streaming and outside of news, let's talk about people like Mr. Beast, etc. Right? That kind of content is also going to come under this regulatory framework, and the demand is anyone who doesn't do news but does other kind of content, you need to have this content evaluation committee within your organization, which means that my friend Kaushal, who runs a travel blog, a travel sort of video channel on YouTube, will have to have a content evaluation committee comprising of someone from women and child welfare, someone from SC, ST, and other minorities, who will evaluate and approve the content before it goes up. The content evaluation committee was there in the previous version of the bill. It has thankfully been removed from this version. So in some cases, this bill is an improvement over the previous version. In some cases, it's worse because it expands the scope to cover everyone rather than just streaming companies and news entities. It covers everyone. So that content evaluation. So what happens is today, let's say if you take an Amazon Prime, a Hotstar, or a Netflix, under their regulatory guidelines, they have something called SNP, which is Standard and Practices Team, which evaluates their content in any case, and that's mostly lawyers. Now they have to have, and that has had statutory approval. On top of that, they'll have to have a content evaluation team. On top of that, they will have to register with a self-regulatory organization, and then there will be a broadcast advisory council that can take appeals and complaints and act against these entities. So all of these things are also going to be applicable to any kind of online content creator that's not doing news, but there won't be a standard and practices team. So you'll have to hire people from those and build that team within your organization if you're not doing news.
So,
No, at the
no,
newsroom we
I
have
have a
to.
question. I have a question here because I've already got this, Nikhil, and Danya, this is for you also. I have got this comment every time we've talked about the broadcast bill is that what are you crying about? We all need regulation. There has to be freedom within, legal limits, norms. Can we just clarify this point? Is are there not enough laws already in place that if I'm breaking the law of the land, I will anyways be prosecuted? So, how does this broadcast bill ensure that there is a level playing field, there is no fake news, there is no illegality, or this is much, much beyond it? I think that point needs to be clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So
Nikhil, basically, you have two people questioning you now. I have to add to what Akash is saying. So, everywhere we go and talk about our opposition to whether it's a digital media bill or the broadcasting bill, what people immediately tell us back is that, but there should be some regulation.
Hmm,
There are
hmm.
so many YouTube channels which do all sorts of crap. Who's going to regulate them? Why can't the government regulate you?
so how India regulates things is that they create rules, and then when something becomes big, like for example, if a video surfaces on Twitter and becomes popular, then suddenly authorities wake up and act. We are mostly an anarchy in the way things operate, but then but they throw the rule book at you when they need to throw the rule book at you.
Hmm.
So this is the creation of a rule book. Well-meaning honest people like us will create, maybe end up either going to court or creating those committees and taking on the cost. 90% of people will not. When they violate something, then they'll throw these rules. But to address your initial question, um, we have enough regulations. There are restrictions on free speech. There are laws related to defamation. If you do any illegal speech, you can be taken to court. The police has enough teeth. The laws have enough power. We don't need an additional regulation. In fact, what happens is, remember something, these are all regulatory framework that still reinforce the same demand or the same restrictions that our fundamental rights provide on freedom of expression. What these things do is that they create a regulatory structure to weed out people who can't afford to participate in this. What the internet has done is that it has democratized speech. It has allowed all of us. I mean, I was a blogger who turned professional, right? So it's allowed us an opportunity to build something and to serve readers, to serve viewers that is now becoming costlier, so as to remove some people from it or to
Hmm.
make it more onerous on us. It does makes no change to my mind right now in terms of adding more anything beyond compliance regulation, and that's the
Uh,
problem. If someone defames anyone, they can take them to court, right? And they have done that in the past. Will this give more powers for defamation? No, it won't. That already exists.
Hmm.
It just means you'll have one more person evaluating your content before it goes out, which is, to my mind, a layer of free censorship. Why is that even needed?
Nikhil, can I just interrupt you? What are the emergency powers that the government has according to the bill?
At least in case of online, I don't see any emergency powers that exist. In case of broadcast, which is television, they have added emergency power. There was some confusion about this. Even I was a little confused when I read this initially. But those emergency powers are, I mean, I'll have to go through the bill again, but they were basically to take down certain content that were there, but they're only for broadcasters. Ask Forcing someone to issue an apology and running an apology on screen, those already exist in case of cable television. So the same regulations been reinforced over here because this is trying to replace the Cable Television Networks Act. um, but in case of online, that, as far as my reading is, that does not exist.
Akash, let me come to you. You were speaking about the chilling effect that such a bill can have. But I also want to ask you about how the whole bill, the government has gone about the bill, right? It's complete secret. I was reading that there are watermarks on every copy of the bill which has been given so that even if it's leaked, the government knows who. I mean,
I
all
have seen
this,
those watermarks.
yeah, all these are really dangerous for a democracy, right? Even a bill is not being discussed in public properly.
So I think we are on a slippery slope. the expectation of I mean, we saw what happened in Parliament yesterday with the journalists being locked up the way they were, put in a literal cage. I mean, now we can't even speak figuratively. It was literally a cage that they had been put in. Then, of course, there was a little bit of protest, and they undid that apparently. So I think we are now in a stage where consultation, discussion is a bit of a passe, and that is why I think people like us have to speak up and say that no, this is not how democracy works. You have to first discuss it, because people seem to have forgotten that also, that a bill is open for public discussion. It is a bill that will impact not only content creators but also news consumers. The millions of people who watch these content creators also, they should also be party to any sort of a regulatory framework that is being made. The fact that the government is doing this in such a cloak and dagger way gives a lot of reason to worry. So, unlike Nikhil, who knows the bill and the ins and outs, I am going to go with the broader picture of how the government is behaving. Because this is exactly what they had done with the farmer bills, also. They had tried to stuff it down. And this is a culture that is coming in. The BNS also, the way it was passed with so many scores of opposition MPs suspended, this is a very clear indication that the intent is not right. And we always have to look at the intent that the government is trying to do. Already, Nikhil has made it very clear there is enough and more legal safeguards. There is enough and more prosecution that can be done if anybody is doing anything wrong. Do we need a culture ministry now who will sit and watch everybody's YouTube channel? What dress are you wearing? What words are you using? So, we are headed again in that era of, as I said, license Raj. In that sense, we will have some sort of a culture ministry. Are we going the Iran way, where we will have a ministry of decorum and culture, which will now decide who wears what and who speaks what? So this is very Orwellian in that sense, and that is why it's very worrying, is that the last standing branch of free speech within the legal framework was digital. After print, after television, now the clear intent is to do away with digital as well.
So
It's not like the
I,
government hasn't used any of these acts. Recently, we saw that the caravans article was taken down using Section 69A of the IT Act. Akash, it's always been known that the government is highly skeptical of digital news media. But do you also believe that what transpired in the 2024 elections has had a bearing, which is why the government is now trying to clamp down on digital media and bring this broadcasting services regulation bill?
I really think that this is a return gift for 2024. I have no doubt in my mind. Would I, and I've said this on my channel also, would I say that no, digital creators went and changed the election results? Maybe not. But did the digital content creators change and challenge the narrative? Very much so. Because still the digital ecosystem came alive and you had independent content creators doing their work. Print and television were largely unchallenged. I would say till 2019, 2020. This last 2, 3 years, the spurt of people speaking up. Of course, there were content creators and there were channels like yours. But I think what happened is the democratization process happened more. The disillusionment with mainstream media happened more. Let's remember that also. And a lot of disillusioned mainstream media creators and mainstream media consumers shifted to digital. The government is seeing this. Let's give the devil its due. The government is very astute when it comes to understanding which way the wind is blowing. They are seeing how mainstream media is being discredited. Tell me, Dhanya, when was it that we would ever had a problem when we stepped out and reported that people would cuss us, chant slogans against us? 10 years ago, it was unimaginable that the news reporters would be cussed at in a public space. And now it's almost every day this is happening. The government is seeing how television channels are being booed away from major places. And they are seeing the graph of digital. They just want to control it before it gets completely out of hand. And I think digital is just getting started at this point of time. So, yes, 2024 has a huge role to play.
Nikhil, tell me, what is the chilling effect that this broadcasting services regulation bill can have on content creators on the internet?
I think the first chilling effect is going to be who gets into this space. right? Because if you're going to have a that kind of regulatory burden, the cost of, let's say, you'll have to pay a certain amount of money to join a self-regulatory organization, then the kind of people who will start creating, and look, most creators start this most successful creators start this as hobbies, and then they become big. But you will have to now have these overheads from the beginning. So the biggest effect that we is the one that we will not see, people not joining and not doing things on time, right? Then there's going to be the regulations under the IT rules where content can be taken down under Section 69A. Censorship can happen, and Section 69A censorship is secret. You're not supposed to disclose it even. So those problems will come in. We won't see the things that are missing, in a sense. What's happened with a lot of creators also, especially in case of streaming services, is that they have started self-censoring. They're afraid of reactions, they're afraid of complaints, they're afraid of grievances. And look, Akash knows this, and you know this as well. We're in a country where anything we say at any given point in time will offend at least someone, right?
Mm,
And let's not forget that the right to offend is an integral part of free speech. The new criminal laws that have been passed actually also try and undo the culture that we have of satire, saying even implied um, things can be defamatory, right? So there is a, if you look at this in the context of everything else that's around us, you're creating an environment where free speech is going to get significantly curtailed in the country, whether it is through the criminal bills, and it takes action against one person for there to be a chilling effect.
okay.
Remember that the streaming services industry did not challenge these rules in court. The news organizations did. Why is that? Because almost about 3 or 4 months before the IT rules came out, Amazon was exec was forced to go to a high court and under the threat of jail if they didn't turn up for it because of certain comments that were made in a so-called tandav. That
Mm,
sent a chilling effect across that industry. So I'm saying the chilling effect is already being seen in
Nikhil,
the absence of certain kinds of content. Um, One thing I wanted to address when based on what you asked Akash about this whole secrecy around this bill. I actually don't really understand the secrecy. They probably want to take this to Parliament straight because they can go around and say we've already done a public consultation on this. We've already received feedback. But the fact is the government has not released the submissions that they received as a part of that consultation. Um, which is deeply problematic. They've held multiple meetings with ministries over the last month and a half, including when the elections were on, with various stakeholders, industry stakeholders, not with ministries, to get feedback. And now they've given this to a certain number of people, a limited set of people for more feedback. They've given them 3 weeks to give feedback. Why is it? Is this a bill being made for the industry or for the citizens of India? Why is it? What are they afraid of? If this bill becomes public, like our reporting is making it, if the entire text becomes public, what are they afraid of? Is the question. There've been demands made for copies of this bill in Parliament as well. They're saying the bill is still in drafting, but then a copy has been shared publicly now, privately with certain stakeholders.
mm.
So I'm a little like I just don't know what the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting is afraid of, and I'd like the minister to actually answer that question. Why can't you give it to all of us to see? Um, there is a principal point which I want to make, which is very important, which is that this is all private viewing. So the very first phrase broadcast should not apply to any online content creator because all of this is on demand. It's full content. It's one is to one. The internet is not like television where it's being broadcast on the airwaves or on a cable
Yeah.
and anyone can flick a channel and watch something that is problematic. And there is precedence here. In the Supreme Court, in a case filed by a lawyer called Kamlesh Vaswani, trying to get pornography banned in India. India's Attorney General Mukul Rohtgi at that time went in, and I was in court at that hearing. He said, "We don't want to get into someone's bedroom to regulate what you're doing privately." My question is, if pornography is private viewing, why isn't YouTube private viewing? Why isn't Netflix private viewing?
Mm.
Why isn't what I'm reading on social media private viewing? I'm viewing it on a private device or a private TV set through streaming, right? What is the fundamental functional difference between that and this, that you say you don't want to regulate private viewing, and the phrase you use was, we don't want to get into someone's bedroom and regulate what they're viewing, right?
Mm.
Why are they coming into our bedrooms to regulate what we're watching on streaming services then? And so the fundamental premise of this bill is wrong, in my opinion. And unfortunately, no one's challenging that aspect.
Uh,
I'll
I want to ask a question to Akash. Akash, two things. One is, what is the cost which you think this will have on small groups, small teams, right? Like
hmm.
one person running a YouTube channel, two people like that. And second is that self censoring. That's something that both of you spoke about. Can a bill like this, which if it does become the law, also ensure that people self censor themselves a lot?
I'll get into the cost and the self-censoring also. Just take Nikhil's point forward also on the private one-on-one pull viewing. It's very, very important, Dhanya, that point. When the government of India has said that I am not going to get into the bedroom of someone, and I would say that there is a lot that the government needs to do in terms of regulating child porn for sure. There is free porn accessibility. There is cheap data. The government doesn't seem to be that worried about the porn crisis in the country. We are one of the largest consumers of porn in the world, but the government is not concerned there. The government is not concerned when there is free sex going on. People are having sex in Big Boss and on Big Boss OTT, and it is being broadcast, and the government is seemingly okay with that also. But the government is very, very concerned about what Chuttu Puttu news content creators would do, even those without any following also. But the government wants to keep a very close tab. I think first and foremost, public should understand and the government should also admit why this is being done. I have no problems, do it. But don't do it under the guise that we are mother of democracy. Say that we are wanting to be a dictatorship. Say that we don't want free speech and then do it. What I can't digest is the hypocrisy of doing this so brazenly and then getting all vomity if somebody says or uses the word dictator. That really sets alarm bells. How dare you? We are daring is because you're doing this. So that's, I think can we come to a conclusion, can we come to a certain understanding is that boss ये democracy नहीं है. So that is one. B, the cost. You know, we are, for example, the News Minute. You guys are still bigger. There is a company. We are smaller. We are six people. There are YouTubers that are two people. Now, out of one or two people, there would be YouTubers who are only one person also. Now, you want this one person also to be a grievance redressal person whose only job in the world would be to answer anyone who has a problem with your show. And anybody doing news will tell you, I mean, I'm not even getting into the world of satire. Anybody doing news, anybody will have a problem. So, am I now going to sit in a nanny state and answer or employ somebody to answer the grievances of somebody? So, what if someday the IT cell decides that let's get this guy and send 1,000 grievances to this person? I'm dead. I'm done. I'm over.
Exactly.
Khatam,
No,
tata,
Exactly.
this has
goodbye.
happened. This has happened. I'll give you my example. Yes, go on, go on. Yes. Hmm.
So that is one. So in terms of cost, huge. In terms of, we always underestimate the chilling impact. I'm sure you get comments. People say that, will I land up in a problem if I comment on your video? People are scared of commenting on a video. That is the India that we are living in. And now you're saying that anybody who does a small Instagram channel or a YouTube channel or a Twitter feed will have to adhere to, laws and regulation. What are you talking about? Then
Content
we would be the
evaluation
last.
committee.
And
Content
So,
evaluation
evaluation
committee.
committee.
yeah, Nikhil, once we had this incident where a doctor had died and we had criticized him for something unrelated, but he had died. We had around like 50, 60 people emailing us about the article. And the rule under digital media is such that we have to reply to each one separately, right? Recently, we got a complaint from some person who has a problem with an article about a particular cast that we wrote. The grievance is simply, I don't like the article. I'm supposed to reply to it now because that is what the law has said. Nikhil, I want to wrap the discussion. I want to ask you one question. When the digital media bill was mooted, one problem we faced at that time was that the mainstream media, the legacy media, initially did not oppose the bill. In fact, they said that, look, we all are under whatever broadcasting and print associations. So we will remain there. Our digital sites will also be remaining there. You can take action on this news minute scroll, news laundry types. Do you believe that this time there is more consensus and the mainstream media will also come together to oppose this bill?
I actually don't think so, because there is
Hmm.
an exemption for e-papers. The previous version of the bill also exempted online traditional publishers. Um, I don't think they're going to do anything about this. They would want restrictions because they see everyone online as competition for them. You see, they're coming out of an environment where there were oligopolies. There were everyone had their own. They were controlled by distribution of newspapers and distribution of channels. That limited distribution meant that they had exclusivity and therefore they could make more money off it. All
Yep.
of a sudden, they're facing infinite competition from the internet. So I remember a very famous news anchor that you have worked with in the past coming to a TRAI meeting on regulation of cable, and his exact phrase was that today companies like Huffington Post can come into India and provide news, and we are doing nothing to stop that. At the same time, you're increasing the burden on cable networks. The anchor turned up there. You know who I'm talking about, right? And and um, and what happened when the IT rules came out? Huffington Post India shut down. Yahoo News left the country. So we have actual examples of rules and regulations killing our access to news. And Huffington Post did some of the best reporting at that point in time in this country. So this is the impact that these regulations are going to have. And mainstream media actually wants more regulation because the they have the bureaucracy to deal with it. Today, I can cover tech policy better than any mainstream media publication can and build a business out of it. They don't. They want to increase the burden on us so that we're not able to compete with them.
Yeah.
Akash, my final question to you is that do you believe that a large section of content creators and consumers are unaware of what is happening, and that also poses a problem, that there is very less awareness of what the government is planning for all of us?
So generally, what happens is, then yeah, you would have seen this over the years also. Is that the problem with people like us is that we see what is coming, and I remember doing an episode on the digital broadcast bill, and it was called "End of Deshbhakt" in February 2024. That episode had a very muted response. Interestingly, that episode has more views now than what it had in February. So somewhere along the line, I think people saw it and people are starting to understand it. But at that point of time, it was like, what are you talking about? Why are you creating this sort of a false emergency? So first and foremost, I think we as a community need to understand is that we are at a threshold of a very, very big tectonic change. I think people need to be explained this whole point that for news print, the government can control me in five different ways. There is advertising, there is the print itself, the cost of that print, and the press and the permissions. For television, it is uplinking, downlinking, permission, satellite, etc.,
Correct.
channel permissions. There are so many buttons that the government can press when it comes to print, when it comes to traditional mainstream television. The government was finding it's very hard to press buttons when it comes to digital. Of course, they have tried. When there is any financial question mark, when there is any integrity issues, they've gone after people. I'm not getting into the details there. But there are these organizations that they haven't been able to touch is because they're small, they're independent, they are efficient, they don't take too much of resources to run. As Nikhil was saying, we deliberately keep ourselves small so that we don't have
And
to
they
take any
don't take
loans
government acts. And
and
they
we don't
don't
take
take
government
government
ads. Yeah, absolutely. And we are small. How to reach out to these people, therefore? And one thing Nikhil said, very, very important, Danya, it's very important to remember that this is a rule book that is being created. And let's not kid ourselves, it will be selectively thrown. So those people who are very happy sitting in the Godi, they don't have to worry about it. Who has to worry is the people who are asking questions about the constitution, about the country, about law and order. They will be the ones who have to worry. Who will have to worry is the audience that we have served very diligently over the last few years, given them the right information, and they value us for that. I hope that at least they worry. they support us, and we get the voice. And ultimately, Danya, I'm going to say, and the opposition might beat me for this, but ultimately, I think the people of this country have given a huge reward, a huge vote of confidence to the opposition, given that the alliance only worked for 2 months. It is now also for the alliance, for the opposition to understand this, because whatever little bit word that what they were doing and what they were talking when they were blocked out by the mainstream media was done by independent digital content creators. Will they wake up to this in time? I think that's going to be very, very important.
Nikhil, any closing comments?
Uh, Dhanya, I just want this bill to be made public by the government of India. I want to see action from the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting in terms of justifying what they are trying to do. I want there to be a public consultation so we can respond to it, and for things to be transparent in terms of submissions. There is a process to which this is by which this happens. Eventually, I think we will have to go to court to challenge it, just like we've had to do in the past. But the government has time on its side, and so it's going to be a long drawn out battle for survival and for speech. And we've seen these battles before. We fought these battles before, but it's a never ending situation, unfortunately. I just hope that there can be enough of a response from people who are viewing this, who are concerned about how the direction that speech is taking in our democracy, that it's being suppressed, it's being subdued, it's being censored. Demand transparency and accountability of the government, and hopefully this bill never makes it to parliament. That would be my biggest hope, to be honest.
Hopefully this bill never makes it to parliament. I mean, the lesson that we had from the digital media bill, in fact, I was one of the first people to approach court along with the wire. There were many other news organizations which went to court. There was also TM Krishna, the singer, who had approached the Madras High Court at that time. There were a lot of stays given on certain sections of digital media bill, but the government went on as usual because the bill in
Mm.
itself was not stayed. So I really hope, like you too, Nikhil, that this bill never reaches the parliament itself. Let's see what plays out, and we'll have more conversations. Thank you very much, Akash and Nikhil, for joining me here.
Thank you.